The sentence that shook DC, it started with a sentence. Just one sentence said calmly in a TV studio on a rainy Tuesday night in Washington, D.C. If taxpayers are footing the bill for silk-covered banquets at the First Lady's residence, while public school cafeterias are shutting down, we damn well have a right to ask why. That was all Zohran Mamdani said, but the silence that followed, it wasn't just in the studio. It spread like smoke through the Capitol, into staffers' phones, into Twitter feeds, into group chats that had never once discussed politics. The host tried to cut in. Are you implying that the Garland administration is misusing public funds? I'm not implying anything, Zohran said without blinking. The receipts are public. We saw them. And if someone's uncomfortable with that, maybe they should be. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't smile. He didn't blink. But Washington felt it, and it flinched. By the time Zohran stepped out into the misty night, his aide Jordan was already holding up her phone. You're trending, Zohran said it. He just nodded. Let them. He didn't care about the trend. He cared about the silence. The kind that let a $47,000 floral display at a private birthday party go unnoticed, while teachers in Baltimore were buying chalk with their own money. He walked into his apartment in Adams Morgan around midnight. The clip had hit 2.6 million views. Left-wing activists called him brave. Right-wing hosts called it an attack on the First Lady. But most stayed quiet because the truth was raw. And Zohran Mamdani had just cracked it open. Somewhere in a brownstone near DuPont Circle, Merrick Garland sat still. He wasn't watching the news. He was watching his son, Jonathan Garland, 18 years old, pacing the room with his phone in his hand, face flushed. She humiliated her, Jonathan said. She read a budget sheet, Garland replied calmly. But his son wasn't calm. I'm calling the police. She endangered Mom. That's harassment. Garland looked up finally. Jonathan! But it was too late. The call had already been made. The next morning, Zohran was pouring his second cup of coffee when Jordan peeked in, pale. There's a call for you. From Metro PD. He raised an eyebrow. Not a fan? No, they say it's serious. He took the landline. This is Representative Mamdani. Good morning, sir. This is Captain Ellis with the D.C. Police Department. I regret to inform you that a harassment complaint has been filed against you by Mr. Jonathan Garland. Zohran stared ahead. For what? For your statements last night. He claims your remarks created a personal security risk for his mother. Silence. Long, cold. A teenager called the police over a televised interview? Yes, sir. Due to the complainant's status, we're required to notify your office, though no legal action is being taken. Understood, Zohran said quietly. Thank you. He hung up. Jordan was still frozen. What the hell just happened? Zohran didn't answer. By noon, it was everywhere. First a blog, then a push alert, then CNN, then TikTok. Jonathan Garland accuses Congressman Mamdani of harassment. Reporters camped outside his office. One shouted, "Are you accusing the First Family of corruption?" Zohran replied without blinking. I'm saying that the American people deserve answers about how their money is being used. That's not harassment. That's democracy. Another asked, will you apologize? He didn't even look at them. For what? Reading the truth out loud? That night, the online world caught fire. Some reposted the clip with the caption, "This is harassment, then what the hell is silence?" Have you ever seen someone punished just for asking a question? Tell me in the comments, I really want to know. The silence that spoke louder than power. By the next morning, the pressure was boiling. The First Lady's team had gone into full lockdown. No statements, no comments, just a vague post on her foundation's Instagram with a flower emoji and the caption, "Focus on kindness." But the people weren't buying it because the receipts were out. TikTok users stitched Zohran's quote with aerial shots of Washington, D.C.'s most underfunded schools. Instagram stories showed crumbling classrooms next to photos of champagne towers from the First Lady's birthday reception. It was no longer just political, it was personal. And in a country where millions live paycheck to paycheck, a $12,000 cake wasn't just excessive, it was offensive. Inside Zohran's office, the energy had shifted. His phone didn't stop buzzing. From cable news producers to grassroots organizers, podcast hosts, retired school teachers, it seemed like everyone had something to say. Jordan came in holding a small package. "Someone sent you lavender soap from Idaho?" Zohran chuckled lightly. "That's oddly specific. She says her daughter's a teacher, told you not to back down." But it wasn't just soap and sympathy. A message from Charles Drummond, one of the most respected constitutional lawyers in the country, appeared on Zohran's private line. "Call me, now." Charles didn't waste time with greetings. "You're being cornered, Zohran." "I figured. They're not after a retraction anymore. They want your silence. Permanently." There was a pause. "You did the one thing they didn't plan for," Charles continued. "You made people feel again. And that scares the hell out of them." Zohran nodded slowly, pacing the edge of his office window. "So what do I do?" "You already did it," Charles said. "Now don't flinch." Meanwhile, deep inside the White House East Wing, chaos reigned. Staffers were leaking anonymous memos. One particularly brutal document surfaced in an obscure political forum. It accused Zohran Mamdani of a personal vendetta, hinting that his comments might have been racially motivated. An insinuation so thin it was almost desperate. But it didn't matter, because now the country was listening, and the louder the system screamed, the calmer Zohran became. At a small town hall in Gary, Indiana, Zohran stood on a makeshift stage. No teleprompter, no flashy suit, just him, a microphone, and a room full of factory workers, nurses, and retirees. One man stood up, late 60s, union cap in hand. "I never cared about DC politics," and he said, "but I know a damn lie when I hear one, and I know honesty when I see it. Don't stop." Zohran looked him in the eye. "I won't." That moment went viral, not because it was loud, but because it was real. By midnight, #WeStandWithZohran had overtaken trending hashtags across the country. In Iowa, veterans posted old service medals. In Atlanta, teachers posted school supply receipts. In Chicago, a group of high school students created a thread titled, "This is what democracy should look like." Jordan scrolling through the tags, overwhelmed. "You're not a congressman anymore," she whispered. "You're a movement." Zohran didn't reply. Instead, he opened his laptop and typed just 4 words: "Release every single receipt." Would you have done what Zohran did? Be honest. Leave a comment. The receipts that couldn't be buried Friday morning. Washington was gray and quiet on the surface, but inside federal buildings, panic buzzed like electricity. Because just minutes after sunrise, the official website of the House Budget Oversight Committee lit up with something no one expected. A 248-page PDF titled, "Expenditures Related to the First Lady's Events," unredacted. It wasn't polished. It wasn't framed. It was raw government data, invoices, internal memos, purchase orders for velvet drapes, imported orchids, bespoke catering for private gatherings, $38,000 here, $11,500 there. A single line stood out in bright red. Floral arrangements for intimate dinner, $19,200. Source, Office of the First Lady. There were no press releases, no hashtags, just facts, and facts don't blink. Zohran didn't say a word. He posted a screenshot of that floral invoice on his personal X account with one caption, "You paid for this." Within 10 minutes, it had 300,000 shares. Teachers shared it, nurses, veterans, students, even small business owners who once said politics wasn't their thing. One woman commented, "I've worked 26 years in a public clinic and we couldn't get new chairs, but she had peonies air freighted in." Another simply wrote, "Do they think we're blind?" But while the public roared, the system did what it always does when threatened. It retaliated. By noon, a right-wing tabloid published a story titled, "Who Really Is Zohran Mamdani?" The article made vague claims about his college years, calling him emotional, erratic, and unfit. No sources, no evidence, just suggestion. It was classic political mudslinging. But this time, it didn't land, because the people had seen the truth, and they weren't unseeing it. In fact, the more they tried to smear him, the more composed he looked. Saturday night, a quiet event hall at Harris-Dow University, St. Louis. No stage lights, no press, just rows of folding chairs and hundreds of students, professors, and parents. Zohran stepped up. No notes, no PR handler. "I didn't release those documents to attack anyone," he began. "I did it because the people who paid those bills have the right to know what was bought." He paused. "I'm not here to play nice. I'm here to tell the truth, even if it lands in the wrong mailbox." Silence. Then applause. Not polite, not mild. It was thunderous. Later that night, alone in his car, Zohran finally exhaled. Jordan sat beside him, scrolling. Every major paper's covering it now, even the ones that used to ignore you. Zohran stared out the window. "This was never about me. It's about who gets to ask questions in this country and who gets punished for it." Jordan nodded slowly. "And now?" He didn't answer immediately. Then, "Now we find out how far they're willing to go to silence us." Have you ever been punished just for telling the truth? Let's talk about it below. When power makes it personal, by Monday morning, the gloves were off. In the early hours, an anonymous memo leaked to a high-profile political newsletter. The subject line read, Auditoire. Concerns regarding Congressman Mamdani's aggressive targeting of federal institutions. No signatures, no official headers. But the message was crystal clear. The system wasn't just embarrassed anymore. It was angry, and it wanted blood. The memo accused Zohran of undermining national unity, fostering distrust in democratic institutions, and most absurdly, destabilizing youth morale. But what rattled Zohran wasn't the language. It was the final line. If disciplinary action is not considered, informal consequences may become necessary. No one needed a dictionary to know what that meant. That morning, Jordan burst into Zohran's office, face pale. "They're dragging your name through cable news. Now they're calling you dangerously unpatriotic." He didn't flinch. "Let them." She handed him her phone. "Look at this." It was a screenshot from a major news network. A split screen. On one side, Zohran's face under the headline, "Is this the new face of division?" On the other, a file photo of Merrick Garland walking with his son, the word victims, underneath. Zohran looked down for a moment, then back up. "They're not afraid of me," he said quietly. "They're afraid of what I made visible." Meanwhile, inside the East Wing, the First Lady was livid. "This could have been handled," she snapped at her staff, "but instead you let it fester. And now the country thinks I threw a gala while public schools were shutting down." One advisor whispered, "We tried to deflect." "Deflect?" she interrupted. "You let a 31-year-old congressman turn a spreadsheet into a national revolt." Another aide mumbled, "He looks honest because he is." Silence. No one dared breathe. Back in D.C., something unexpected happened. A group of retired postal workers from Milwaukee launched a letter-writing campaign supporting Zohran. In Arkansas, students organized a spontaneous teach-in called "Where the Money Goes, a Lesson in Government Spending." The hashtag #WePaidForTheParty began trending on every platform. And then, like a match to gasoline, someone leaked another document. This one was brutal. A $134,000 invoice for imported flowers and table centerpieces for a private garden event hosted by the First Lady's office. It wasn't a smoking gun, it was a wildfire. Zohran didn't celebrate. He didn't gloat. He sat at his desk reviewing the documents over and over, like he was searching for something deeper. Maybe confirmation, maybe peace. Jordan noticed. "They think you're made of steel," she said gently. He looked up, eyes tired. "I'm not here to be strong. I'm here to be clear. Do you think speaking truth to power is worth the risk? Tell me what you believe, and don't hold back." The moment they tried to break him, by Wednesday, it wasn't just a scandal anymore. It was a storm, and Zohran Mamdani was standing in the middle of it, unmoving. He had just returned from a budget hearing when Jordan handed him a manila envelope. "No sender," she said, "just left at the front desk." Inside, a black and white photocopy, a photo from his college years, blurry, laughing with friends, a red circle drawn around his face, and scrawled underneath in thick Sharpie, You're next. No signature, no address, just a message soaked in threat. Jordan stared. We should call someone. Zohran folded the page slowly. They already did. You're not scared? I'm angry. That afternoon, Zohran held a press briefing, not in front of cameras, but in a classroom in Baltimore, with chipped walls and fluorescent lights that flickered overhead. The students sat in silence. This isn't about flowers anymore, he said softly. This is about a government that's forgotten who it works for. A young girl raised her hand, maybe 16. Are you afraid they'll come after you harder? Zohran paused, then smiled gently. I'm more afraid of what happens if I stay silent. The room stayed quiet, not because they didn't have questions, but because the answer had already been lived by too many of them. Back in Washington, the blowback was reaching dangerous levels. One media outlet released a hit piece claiming Zohran was emotionally unstable and too reactive for federal office. Another tried to tie him to radical student groups he never even joined. They didn't care about facts. They wanted him rattled. But every time they tried to shake him, he came back sharper. At a housing forum in Memphis, he addressed a packed hall. They say I'm too emotional, but maybe that's the problem. Congress has been cold for too long. Cold to poverty, cold to injustice, cold to the truth. Meanwhile, whistleblowers started coming forward. Former aides from inside the Office of Budget and Administration released emails, redacted reports, evidence that years of public spending had been buried, altered, rewritten. Zohran didn't issue a statement. He posted one sentence on X. Sunlight reveals everything. That post got 3.2 million views in 2 hours. And suddenly something shifted. The same commentators who had once mocked him now stopped talking altogether. Even the First Lady's inner circle had gone radio silent. The silence wasn't peace, it was fear. Have you ever felt like telling the truth made you a target? You're not alone. Tell your story in the comments. The truth they couldn't stop. By Thursday morning, the pressure wasn't just on Zohran anymore. It was on the system, talk shows, church sermons, union halls. Every corner of American life buzzed with one question. If this was just about flowers and parties, why are they trying so hard to shut him up? Even people who didn't like politics started paying attention. Not to speeches, to documents, to numbers, to truth. Inside Zohran's office, the pace had become relentless. Volunteers from across the country flooded in. Retirees, law students, veterans, nurses, sorting through thousands of messages. Jordan's phone didn't stop vibrating. I've got 3 podcast invites, 2 union leaders on hold, and a retired priest who wants to send you a handmade quilt. Zohran gave a tired smile. I guess we hit a nerve. But under the smile was something deeper. Wait, not fear, not yet, but something close. Then another leak. This time a memo directly from the First Lady's internal advisory board. It warned of uncontained public backlash, of irreparable credibility loss, and ended with a chilling recommendation. Strategic character deflation of Congressman Mamdani may be the only viable option. They weren't even hiding it anymore. They weren't denying the facts. They were trying to erase the messenger. But Zohran? He didn't blink. Instead, he visited a small high school in Kansas City. No press, no handlers. A young girl raised her hand and asked softly, "Weren't you scared when they tried to destroy you?" He looked her right in the eye. "I was tired," he said. "Tired of the silence, tired of the lies, and tired of pretending it's normal to be afraid for telling the truth." You could have heard a pin drop. That night, a video surfaced online. It was old surveillance footage, grainy, low resolution. It showed a private event on the White House lawn. Floral arches, imported lights, a jazz trio playing under a chandelier hung from a tree, and in the corner the timestamp. Same night Zohran had cited in his report. It wasn't illegal, but it was undeniable. And in that moment, across millions of screens in America, something clicked. He hadn't exaggerated. He hadn't lied. He had told the truth, and they tried to punish him for it. Have you ever seen someone try to erase the truth instead of facing it? Let's talk about it below. I want to hear your story. The fire that wouldn't die. It was Sunday. Cold, quiet, still. But across the country, the silence wasn't peace. It was something else. Tension, reflection, readiness. Because Zohran Mamdani had become something no one expected. Not just a politician, not just a whistleblower, but a mirror. And America was being forced to look at itself. At Harris-Dow University, the lecture hall was filled beyond capacity. No music, no spotlight, just Zohran, standing in front of a podium, hands at his sides. When I first ran for office, he began, I didn't have donors, no name, no party machine, just a promise. He paused, looked at the crowd. A promise that I would ask the questions no one else dared to. A student in the front row whispered, you kept it. Zohran continued, they said I was too young, too idealistic, too emotional. But what I really was tired. Tired of budget lies, tired of silence, tired of pretending comfort mattered more than truth. He looked down for a second, then up. And if speaking up about $19,000 in orchids makes me the villain, then maybe it's time we talk about what kind of heroes this country really wants. The room erupted, not in cheers, in understanding. The kind that doesn't come from clapping, but from waking up. Back in DC, something had shifted. The Ethics Committee launched a formal review, not of Zohran, but of the First Lady's office. For the first time in years, the oversight process wasn't just a formality, it was real. And the term the Mamdani Standard became official government language, used in hearings, memos, internal reforms. What began as a sentence on TV had become the gold standard for truth in American politics. But none of that changed who Zohran was. Weeks later, he visited a middle school in Cincinnati. No press, no fanfare, just a quiet conversation. A boy, maybe 12, raised his hand, nervous. Weren't you scared they'd ruin your life? Zohran knelt beside him. I was, he said gently. But one day you stop asking what happens if you speak up and start asking what happens if you don't. That night, alone in his apartment, Zohran got a final message. No sender, just one line. They thought you'd burn, but you lit away. He sat still, then whispered to himself, we're not done yet. Because this was never just about a birthday party, or an invoice, or a headline. It was about truth, and what it cost to speak it out loud. And now, finally, more people were ready to pay that price. Would you have stayed silent or spoken up like Zohran? Tell the truth in the comments. Someone out there needs to hear it.